see. I usually
And
do this on YouTube.
we are a go.
All right.
I didn't post the preview early enough to really let people know we were going to do this, but that's why there'll be the video to watch later.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Then come check it out later.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh shit!
All right.
I'm the only one without a drink, but that's because I'm
man.
smoking. I'm smoking some ribs today.
Yeah, this gives me an excuse to do a little bit of day drinking.
All right, Jim, you going to kick us off?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying I don't know if you saw the preview I made for it. Said we're not going to beat the dead horse. We are not going to talk about all the same stuff that everybody else already did videos on. We might do like a quick mention, just kind of our opinion, but everyone else has already talked about. So a couple things, and was talking to Eric about before you hopped on, and you and me talked about the other day. I think we're in agreement that one, quit fucking calling them influencers. They're retailers. Like the Black Flag did that one video where he's like, I gave these to influencers, and then everybody just ran with it, and it's really annoying. I'm not mad at people for buying books to try and resell for a profit, because that's literally what we all do. I'm not mad at Black Flag for pre-selling some to retailers because he's got to sell his books. Like everything that everybody's mad about, I'm just not mad about.
The one thing I would that I disagree with Randy on a little bit, with Jamie, I'm sorry, because everybody's probably looking at who the hell is Randy. But with Jamie is the lack of transparency on Black Flag, right? So his video that he took down that somebody had, he kind of spoke to why he did what he did. And he's a retailer, so you have to sell those books, right? But he is not a new retailer, and he's had some pretty big hits or some successful releases there. This was some dead stock, and not being transparent in what he was doing, and then not offering the same to everybody else, right? So there's some conflicting information of who cut the line, who didn't cut the line, all this other stuff. But I do agree. We are in agreement that, the people who are catching the most flack are retailers. They just happen to have a big platform, whether that be YouTube, an Instagram following, or whatever. So they shouldn't have been treated differently. But at the same time, they're not influencers. They weren't pumping and dumping those books. Nothing that I could find where they were talking about it. Even the artist Clayton Crane only did one post, and that was about either the day before or the same day for that. And I believe Black Flag talked about it maybe 3 or 4 days leading into that. But my opinion is it's a 750 issue print run, right? 750 copies. It's a con exclusive. It's Miles Morales. Love him or hate him, he's a popular character in the circles. So it was, and the veteran aspect, right? Because I guess at some point Black Flag said that some of the proceeds of those sales were going to go to help some veterans and stuff like that. So there was a lot of things going for it that was going to help that book sell out. Other retailers at C2E2 sold out of their exclusives, So, but we're here. We disagree, and if anybody finds this video, please leave us a comment, and we will reply as best we can. But Jamie, you want to introduce Eric?
Well, so okay. Eric is the premier comic book lawyer in the country. No, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Eric, I'm an attorney. I work mostly in a corporate world at this point, but I did some private practice. Help people out with DUIs, that kind of nonsense. Been mostly in the corporate world, contracts, mergers, acquisitions, all that kind of stuff. So I work in-house for a electronics company. And
you used to work at comic shops too, didn't you, when you were younger?
Yeah, back when I was in high school, man. Yeah, worked in comic shops. That was how I got all my stuff as soon as possible to read it, because nice. that was it. Now I'm all digital with what I read. I'm not really collecting anymore, but still a huge fan. But well,
if you start collecting again, we have books for sale.
I heard that somewhere.
But so one of the things that came up in other videos, and your expertise lends to that, is the legality of what Black Flag did, right? And it since the uproar, eBay flagged one of the comics as counterfeit.
Mhm.
I think it was more that somebody reported it as counterfeit
Yeah.
because there are other instances of that comic being available and still available, I believe, on eBay. Last I checked. So the legality to that, because it appears that not it appears it was dead stock, meaning that it was just extra that Black Flag had, and they slapped an acetate cover onto it and called it a Black Flag exclusive. So, what is your take on that?
Yeah. So I mean, just general on like the custom covers scene. Just looking at that, like first off, it kind of reminds me of like Nike shoes customization. Like I can go
Yeah.
buy 500 pairs of white Air Forces, paint them up special, sell them as some custom shoe. I think I think what's important is how you're passing things off as whether it is custom or whether it is from Nike. And the issue really comes into trademarks. They're copyrights as well, because you have like three different forms of rights. You have patents, which are like inventions. You have copyright, which would be the actual words in the book, the story itself. And then you have trademarks, which could be anything from, what the design of the character is, maybe the name Spider-Man being stylized or unstylized, and certainly the name Marvel. So with a custom shoe, you have the Nike logo on there. Somebody who doesn't know about custom shoes could look at it and think, oh, these are really cool, actually from Nike shoes. And there has to be some type of disclaimer somewhere to say, hey, this isn't their product. You can't, as a consumer, a reasonable consumer, be just look at that and say that this is an actual Nike product. It'd be the same thing for a comic book. So if I put the actual like trademark logos on there, and I noticed that a lot of custom cover guys are throwing like actual Marvel logos on there, which from a trademark standpoint would be concerning, just because it looks like it could come from actual Marvel.
Yep.
And then, so then when you repackage it and in a way, and in this case using the slabbing system, in a way to look like it is official and to call it an exclusive versus something they just created, I think that starts to weaken an argument to say that this isn't we're not duping the customers. I think anybody who doesn't know could walk by, look at this, and say, "Oh, this looks like some special Marvel release," and there's
Right.
nothing
And
to indicate.
that's where I was too when I saw them.
Yeah. So
Like
that's where the legal issue really comes in. Is does the average consumer, can they tell the difference?
Right, and that's been the latest backlash that they've been getting, right? Because this book was the one that started it. They had, I believe, 3 more books, 2 that were supposed to be released at Boston at Boston Fan Expo.
However, I sent you there.
My woods, yeah.
They didn't sell to any of the Expo customers, right? They only sold to other resellers, and it was the same thing. And they had them graded by CGC as well. So yeah, definitely from that aspect, you get it, and that's what other people have been beating them up on, right? Like you put an acetate cover over something, and then they beat up Black Flag, but now they're really beating up CGC because CGC gave it a universal label. And they kind of, and I sent the article where their response where they
I read that.
They said, hey, it was an established artist in the industry. The established artist redid that thing. They affixed that cover on there, and away we go. But it doesn't take into that aspect that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point too, because you have this additional party in the process of where failures happen. Now, I don't see that you could say like too much about like legality issues from comic book grading, because they have a set standards. You could say that enables somebody to act at least unethically. But I mean, ultimately, you're looking at who is responsible for the creation and distribution, and that's still going to be Black Flag.
It's the shape of my head, Jasper.
Should have been wearing a hat like the rest of us.
Yeah.
I don't think I even own a hat.
So Rocky, that's the piece, right? There was an artist in one of those posts where they shared that in the comic book group, and one of the many, they were talking about by what CGC said, I guess we're going to sidetrack by what CGC
Yeah.
said. What's by what CGC said, saying an established artist in the industry. So that means
It's such a weird.
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think any other artist would touch this, right? But maybe down the line somebody might once it kind of cools off. But you get a cover artist who says, "Okay, I did this exclusive for us because we have one." And we go back and we have dead stock and we go back to this cover artist and go, hey, would you do this other one on a separate cover? We have fixed that cover to this new dead stock. We call it Hot Zone Comics, exclusive 2, right? Or exclusive, another exclusive. And away we go. We send them to CGC and they come back Universal Blue labeled. And
yeah, do we get that same treatment?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Right.
Like, are you going to get the yellow NG or an actual label, right?
And it goes to what you said about the potential duping of a customer, right? Because CGC, I think the biggest, to me, the biggest part of the story is CGC is looking at it as a certifier, right? And so they certified this book as authentic. And there is so much gray area to the authenticity of this book. And I think CGC, when they said their thing, hey, we have precedent. Look at what we did with Stray Dogs, and we only find them when they're dead. But the difference is those were done by the publisher, had a different UPC, were distributed by the publisher, wasn't done by essentially what effectively is a local comic book shop that has a relation with one of the premier artists, premier cover artists in the industry, who happens to be a business partner. He happens to be a business partner of Infinite Black or Infinite. I can't remember the publishing house name, and do that. So it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, can we try an experiment to try it out to go there? But
one thing, Eric, if you could make comment on is so Journo's Comics did a couple good videos on this, and one question that they didn't have an answer to, but I talked to you about it the other night, is since it's their book and they own it, are they legally allowed to modify it like they did? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the question that's been up to date for a few or been current for a few things. Like, what type of rights do you have to modify something you own that's physical? Like, do I just have a license to own this? Do I actually own this? And you don't actually, I don't know what a comic book shop might enter into in terms of what type of agreements they have to enter into to actually distribute. But let's say I, as just average Joe, went and bought a bunch of comics. I own them now. I modify them. I never signed anything or agreed to anything to say that, I have a license to this. Like, I actually have ownership of this product now. I don't have ownership of the rights that are inside the book. So the text, the images, that type of stuff. I have a right to have this book. I own it. It's mine. Now I can draw all over it. I can, just totally screw the thing up. And no one's going to bat an eye. The questions really is, what if I'm really good at modifying it? What if instead of just marking this up with Sharpie, I'm actually like really good at making art, and I do this one way or another? Maybe it's funny. Maybe I turn a serious Spider-Man into something comical, and I draw a bunch of Archies in there and just make it stupid. The issue is still the same. This is now a new work of art. It's a new item, and how far from the original does it have to be to become a new item? And then that's when it starts to get into like fair use and that sort of stuff. Like, I could take a comic book, I could just totally change it 100%, and now it's my property. Now it's changed enough to where it's my property. So really what we're talking about is somebody that's minorly changed it. They've changed the cover, and that's an element that's very specific to collectors. It's still okay. It's not illegal as long as you're not passing it off as being either the rights holder or having it been created by the rights holders. And that's why I mentioned earlier that we're talking about having a Marvel logo on the front of it, which could really imply that it came from the publisher. So there's definitely liability in there. So it's the same thing when I was talking about Nike shoes. Like, I think of like little Nas X's Satan shoes that they still had the logo on.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
That was a great test example because a lot of people did think that those came from Nike or some way associated it to Nike. So Nike had to kind of squash it. It was either take it to court or figure some way to settle it, because that becomes brand dilution. You have what's called goodwill, and goodwill is the amount of money that your brand is worth just existing, not in terms of how much money it produces or earns. And Nike has a lot of goodwill in that swoosh logo, and that being on the shoe led some people to believe that they were making, pentagram shoes.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that was part of the backlash too, right? Like it
Yep.
was like a lot of people, and their
Mhm.
torches and pitchforks picked up, like, oh my gosh, Nike's doing satanic rituals and or kind of or signing
Yeah.
off on that.
Yep.
That type of thing. Rocky had a question. He wanted. He asked, "How close are we to trademark infringement?" Though, and I think you answered it.
I would say just by the act of you. So when we're talking about trademarks, we're talking about, are you using that mark in a way to benefit yourself and to make it look as though it's either you've taken that mark or it comes from the originator. And so I'd say we're 100% in trademark infringement, because they use the Marvel logo. Like, that's enough right there. Like, they've infringed on their mark to use it on their own property that they created, that Marvel didn't create. From a copyright standpoint, there's also potential for that as well, for use of the characters, because those characters are copyrighted. Now, no one's going to normally go after somebody for just making their own drawings of Spider-Man or whoever, but they're using it in a commercial setting for the benefit of their business and to make money, which Marvel never sees. They never granted license to use those images or their logo in that. So when, again, we're talking about, I buy the comic book, now it's mine, I own that, but I haven't been given license to everything that's inside that. So I've been given license just by the virtue of owning it to reuse the Marvel logo, even in that same comic book, in some different way. And so when you're talking about the logos, you're talking about, again, brand dilution. Does it look like they've authorized it? And they haven't.
Yeah.
So in terms of going, Marvel could seek restitution from the comic book company. What did you say, it was Black Label or
Black Flag?
Black Flag? Yeah, they could go after them and say, hey, this is problematic. You've made a bunch of money to attaching our name to something that originally was ours, but then you've transformed, but it still made it look like ours. Now, the average consumer, however, since they don't own any of those rights in those logos, those products, anything, they don't have any direct recourse against the seller or against comic book ratings. Like, they have no actual relationship necessarily with them.
Yeah.
You could go and say, like, all right, you could find enough people to do a class action and say they were duped and sue Black Flag. But I mean, the realities of that happening are probably slim, because there's still, as Randy and I were talking about, there's still an aftermarket for these things. So people are making money. It's not valueless. You were duped, but what's your actual damages in buying this?
Right.
You have
the controversy on this is going to keep it up too.
Yeah.
There's some.
I would say what could be more interesting, which I doubt this would happen, but if enough people within a state complain to their attorneys general that a comic book company was creating these things that are causing confusion in the market, the attorneys general could go after everybody. There's nothing that would necessarily preclude that. Again, I doubt seeing that happen, but I think really what we're going to see is what kind of marketplace corrections we're going to have it.
That's what we're laughing at.
That's what Rocky said.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, then with just the font. So
owls, right?
So funny thing, Rocky. There are comic books out there that are satire, right? Do You Poo is a big one, and then you have a couple other publishers who do that. And then
Nightmarish Little Ponies.
Do homage words, and do stuff like that. Like I said, when I initially saw this book, the funny thing is, Jamie is like, "Hey, look at this thing," and he loves everything Ultimate Fallout 4, so he wants to be able to collect all of that.
I tried to get one when it first came out, man. Yeah. I didn't know it was big. And that's what I'm getting at on here, though. It's like, I thought it was a legit book. I'm like, holy shit, an acetate? I love gimmick covers.
Yeah, he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, look at this," and then I'm like, "Oh man, that's the one that's causing all the controversy." So the only reason not the only reason, but one of the things that got me to look into the book more was that, and I had read, it was a Facebook post, right, that that this is what happened when the doors opened at C2E2, or before the doors opened, and Black Flag did this. And by virtue of Facebook, there was tons of comments by then. And then Jamie was like, "Hey, look at this book." And then he goes, "I gotta have it." And then as we find out more, it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, Marvel didn't authorize this."
Yep.
And I think one of the messages I told you, I was like, "Man, 750 is a small print run, because when you do a Marvel book, the minimum order is 3,000, right?"
Yeah.
So
the only thing that threw me off is because they had the Lamole,
yeah,
and that was 1,000.
but
So
that
I
was
was like,
okay.
maybe Marvel did this one time for a comic,
Yeah.
because they've done it before, just not
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it could be, or they probably say, "Hey, you don't have to do 3,000, but your price per issue now comes way down." Or if it's a book that will be like advertised by previews or available through distribution. That might be where the 3,000 minimum comes in, where they say, "Okay, hey, Hot Zone, we will allow you to hire Rocky Myers as your artist. We approve this art, and then we will distribute it for you." And I think that's probably where that 3,000. If you say, "Hey, we want to do this cover and we'll distribute it ourselves," that's probably where it lowers into it. But yeah,
that would certainly work. I mean, that would get by the problem. I think the other thing, like what Rocky noted here, is actually great, because I mean, you can do parody or other things. I think what would have done I think what would also help them if they wanted to keep doing these, what would help Black Flag if they wanted to keep doing these without running into problem, is ditch the Marvel logo on the front and put their own logo on it. Like, regardless of what the grading they get on it, whether it's the yellow or the blue label, I mean, doing that would certainly insulate them legally way better than just trying to say like, "Hey, we did, we sent this to grading everything, like, we thought we were above the board." I mean, that's what I would advise that.
So probably before we get flamed, right? So I think it's purple label. So yellow labels for Signature Series. Purple
That's right.
label,
Yeah.
I think it's for restorations or married.
Yeah,
covers,
that's what it is. Yeah.
and stuff like that. So
yeah, I don't even know if this would be a purple or a green.
Well, a green is something, I think it's something missing from the book, or maybe, but definitely not a yellow label. So anybody in YouTube, Facebook that find that, so we got it. We just
these fucking guys don't even know what they're talking about. They said yellow.
Right? should do that. And then so one of the questions that came up was what I guess now we can just wax poetic about this one, is like what CGC represents, right? Because everybody's getting flamed on this. We had a CBSI. They did an article. They just report the market, and that book was #1 on their hot top 10 for the past week. So they do it, Monday through Friday, because it moved. It moved. Like we talked about, there is a market for controversy, and that's a book that is now controversial. And the other acetate covers that Black Flag did will probably move in very similar state.
I'm getting all these notifications. I'm getting outbid on comics. Sorry.
So everybody looks to CGC looks at CGC, and I even said it, where there are certain comic books that I will not buy unless it's certified as authentic, right? The authenticity piece of that, and CGC giving them a universal blue label saying, "Hey, this is an authentic comic book, free of flaws." Now they've changed back, right, and said, "Hey, we're going to talk about staples added and all these other things," but it's still a blue label. It's still called authentic. I think they're going to change the wording on it as well.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Where it says acetate cover added or something like that, which then just jumps up the other 10 that have, one. I feel bad for who bought the book and sent them in.
They look at the original label,
but there are 10 that are pre-graded, and now they have the original label on there before CGC changed it. So that just even adds more collectability for those of us who like Clayton Crane and like those controversial.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. If Jay pops in here and watches this ever, Clayton Crane, he's a huge Crane fan.
Yeah, and it's it's the du jour. It's the it's the flavor of the week. We'll talk about something else, but it's definitely not a great look for comic retailers, right? Because you see a very if we delve back into what Randy and I agree on is there's a divide in the hobby, right? There's resellers, and I will say resellers, and in that camp includes the hobby reseller who uses the hobby to buy more books, and then you have the retailers, right? But you have that part, and then you have the collectors, right? The people who just want to get their hands on this book because like Jamie did initially, it's like, I need to have this book for my PC because it's Ultimate Fallout 4 and I want it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are pointing their fingers at the resellers, saying that's something bad. But so what's your thought? Not from a legal standpoint, just your opinion and how on. I'm saying the ethics behind it, right? Because I don't know, but like resellers have a job to do, which is to sell their books, right? They buy books low, they sell them high.
It's like the stock market.
Right.
Yep.
Or like stock market, or anything else, right? Like anything else. You hear Gary, you see every time you see a Gary V video, he's out there garage sailing and he's buying salt shakers at $20 and possibly $5 and possibly something for $100 out there. What do you think from ethically as a retailer, or advice that you would give me and Jamie going forward if we were looking at buying some books?
I mean, so I think just buying and reselling, like whether it's in terms of just being a regular shopper, just a collector that's making money on the side. I mean, I think it's totally fair game. I was telling Jamie earlier that where I personally find a problem is when you're buying the internet to buy everything up. So think of the action, like Marvel Heroes figures.
Oh yeah.
If I go on the web, buy up as much stock as I possibly can, I don't really give a care about the industry or the product itself, any of that. I just want to resell that for money. Then you're kind of creating a bubble that doesn't exist, and you're influencing the market in a negative way. And then you're also kind of ruining it for everybody that actually enjoys the hobby. Or the same with graphics cards, PS5s. If I go in there and I just buy them all up because I know I can make $100 quick turnaround, versus whether I'm actually there trying to participate in the market as a real individual that's a fan of these things. I mean, I think that's where it creates an ethical dilemma to me, and that's what I would caution anybody against is, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you like it, you care about the scene, everybody that's in it, you want to take part in it as a business, maybe earn a living off of it? That's great. But once you start taking over the market in a way that creates false value in it, I mean, you're creating a bubble that could have influence down the road for collectors as well. Because once these things eventually work their way into everybody's hands, hey, is there really a limited run on it, or was it just that somebody bought up everything and made it falsely limited? So now people buy something for $200 and then later it's worth 50 at best, maybe $5. I mean, I think of like the 90s with the comic crash. I mean, there's a million different variant covers that are just worthless. Like I got all these Chromium edition stuff in a box in the basement that
sell it to Jamie. Jamie will buy it.
So so I mean, it just depends on whether you're influencing the market in a false way.
So okay, so I will so I collect watches, right? So I'm into watches, and so what you said is something that's labeled or thrown to Rolex a lot, right? Like that false scarcity where where you can't walk into a Rolex AD and get a Submariner, or their stainless steel sport watches and stuff like that. So using that analogy with Black Flag, so if I, as a retailer, go in and I go, you know what? Hey, I'm a retailer. I know you have 750 because that's what you said, and I'm going to buy up 25% of those, right? Because I'm just going to buy 25%, and I'm going to rush back to my booth and start selling at a markup, or hold off, right? I will hold off on that 25% because they're only worth $85 as long, that's what the book originally sold for. So they're only worth $85 as long as you have some there. But the minute I find out you're sold out, then I flood the market, right,
Mhm.
with my 25% buy.
Mhm.
So now when you put it in that context, now I can see why people are
Yeah, and
more mad
so I
at
mean, ultimately, it's still
because
for a short time, it's worth more. But ultimately, I mean, it's unless that created enough long-lasting impact on the market for that particular book, it's going to fall back down again. I mean, you're
yeah.
just kind of, it's. I mean, I also remember. You remember Jim Cramer's stupid stock market show on MSNBC?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, I think he
Yeah.
still does it. One of the things he used to do is he used to leak fake Apple news, like
That's right.
way
Yeah,
back
I
in the day.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
so
didn't
that
know
would
about that.
that would bump up the market. It's kind of the same thing. He's just using information instead of that. So I mean, it's really you're influencing the market for your own gain when it's not something that would actually benefit the market itself. It's just
Okay.
how can I bump this up, make a quick buck, and then split. And I think I mean, it's savvy, but at the same time, I think it hurts the industry and it hurts the fans. And I think
Okay.
that's where the ethical dilemma comes in.
Okay.
There's nothing legally wrong with doing that, but it's not going to help everybody that's really part of this scene.
Okay. And so putting it in that context, I can see where why those two retailers, Nerdy Girl and Scaff, caught some
Yeah.
black on that. Though Nerdy Girl came out and said she bought them for other retailers, right? She kept 12. She confirmed that she bought 75. In a post, she confirmed that she bought 75. She kept 12, 15 really. She kept 15. I think she sold but of those 15, she sold 3 to people who weren't able to get them, but then the other 60 were for other retailer friends who weren't able to make it to
Yeah.
see YouTube and stuff like that. And people in line were buying more for friends or to resell or something like that or turn around. I mean, there were sales that day, that week. C2E2 started, I believe, Thursday. I think they opened their doors or something like that. But by Friday, before C2E2 even had one day in, that damn book was on the CBSI top 10. It was number 2.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was number 2. And really from their perspective, it was just like, hey, he even put it in his article. I hate that it's here. I hate that this book is here. But man, it just moved. And
Yeah.
stuff
I
like
mean,
that.
I think the best thing that can happen for people who bought this, just from a value standpoint, is that the controversy remains. I mean,
Right.
that lore sticks with it about what happened, because that's where that value is going to come in from, is from the story. If they
And,
kept doing this, I mean, let's say this is a normal thing now, and they kept
yeah.
doing it, like that could potentially devalue the whole thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, moving forward, I don't think it's like they can either right the ship or keep doing it, and I don't know that it's going to be helpful anymore. It'll just continue to cause controversy. Somebody at the front will make a few bucks, and then
Yeah.
everybody down the line won't.
Yeah, I think Black Flag is kind of taken the at least from the pictures that they've shown and reports that came out of C2E2 were that they were there, but they weren't there, right? Their
Yeah.
booth was there.
Oh, you
They
mean Boston?
yeah, at Boston. I'm sorry.
Boston.
I said C2E2, but they were at Boston Fan Expo. They were there, but they weren't there, right? Like they had a presence, they had some things, they had some lollipops, and people were like getting very meta on that. So, what is the point of collect and invest in a specific market without risk that the outcome will be equivalent to the initial risk? Somebody must be going for their masters. This isn't a dissertation, Rocky.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
I think what differentiates that is you're talking about where the influence in the market value is coming from. Is it in the product? So like, let's talk about Google. Is it in the value of Google as a business, for what they do as a business, how much they bring in, that sort of thing, and what it's going to look like in the future? Yeah, you're making a huge risk to go in there, but hopefully, and this is why we have the SEC and that sort of stuff. Hopefully, somebody isn't injecting false information into that process. And so when there's an outside party or even an inside party that's altering that value, then you start to have a problem with whether that investment's honest or not, and whether that investment is duping people to put money into something that's not necessarily accurate. So I think about like I just went through a big M&A project, still going. It's going to be going on for the next year, but I mean, we just went through a big one, and the shares get valued at a certain item. Nice. The shares get valued at a certain item based on what information you've presented. Now, if somebody goes in, either they know that the sale's going to happen, and then starts fooling around with share price by insider trading within that transaction. I mean, that's third party messing with the market. Or let's say the information contained in all the financial documents is inaccurate, and then you value the company improperly. I mean, that's again, you're either inflating or deflating the market untruthfully. So when we're talking about commodities, something that's very limited, how you control the availability of, let's say stock shares, or in this case comic books, can certainly have an impact on the market that's not necessarily honest. So ethically, there's a problem. Legally, totally okay. I can, if let's say I'm Elon Musk, I can go buy 1 billion shares of something, hang on to those shares that might not necessarily change the value of the company. But now if I start to work within that market to make those shares way more scarce when everybody wants them, then you are potentially creating a bubble. Now, I mean, if he starts to sell those shares during that bubble because he inflated the price based on his actions, then that could be a problem. Nobody's really doing that right now, so this is just like just a fake example.
So with this one, it goes to then that's probably what fed even more into the controversy initially with what Scaff and with what Nerdy Girl did by buying up. They bought a total of 75 from Nerdy Girl. Reportedly from Scaff, he bought 125. I don't know if he confirmed that or not, but 200, right? So that's about 20-ish% of the 750 there. But one of the things Black Flag started doing after they were technically sold out, so he sold most of his 750 run. According to his video, he sold it to retailers who, prior to opening the doors at C2E2, which that happens all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Retailers sell to other retailers behind closed doors all the time.
I'm in Facebook groups with other retailers where they're like, "Hey, I've got this exclusive. You guys can buy them up at cost if you want."
Yeah, so they do that all the time. But then again, goes, didn't disclose it, and then those retailers took that chunk, and then when he was technically sold out, he jacked the price up on from $85 initially to $100, and was like, "Hey man, these are selling." And I think that was the other problem that they had, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't necessarily, and this is why Whatnot got drug into it. It wasn't necessarily like on eBay or anything like that, but they were selling at $200-300. So he was like, "Hey, now it's $85. I can squeeze another $15 out of you because it's sold out. I'm digging into somebody else's thing. So either you want it or you don't. I still make my money on it. But now I'm getting you for 15 more extra dollars."
And that's market conditions.
He made at least $63,000 out of selling all 750. And that would have been at $85 each.
Yeah. So it's a very nuanced thing. Because I always thought of something when it comes to influencing, to the example you were talking about, was more that, do you have insider information to what that is? And and I think or relationship with whomever has that, for you to be able to grab some and start selling. Whatnot got slammed into it because they had a booth there. They allowed people to sell, and I had an exchange with, I don't know if he's an owner or whatever, but he is a representative of Whatnot, and was, every time they go to a big con, it seems like it's always the same retailers that are there, right? He doesn't, and one thing he disclosed in one of those things is that they buy up copies, but then they give it for free to Eric, Angel, and Jamie, who are selling on the Whatnot booth that weekend. And I was telling Jamie earlier, I said, that's actually smart, right? Because if we have a following big enough and we're able to make money off of this, they get their cut, right? So they spend $85, and you got 3 sellers. Each seller has 10 a piece. We sell all 10 and they go for an average of $200 a piece, then, hey, but they made more than their initial 60 times 85 and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
not you breaking it down that was kind of showed why people use that term influencers so much more. But I in this case, I don't think they influenced the market. They just said, hey, we were able to get something that looks like it's going to be hot.
Yep.
Turn around and start selling it. Now, if
it's important to point out that they started all their auctions at $1.
Yeah,
they didn't jack it up. Like,
that was. I mean, that's the legit market conditions.
Yeah. So and some of the people. And I tell Randy all the time is like, because I always try to talk him out of buying some stuff, and he talks me out of buying stuff all the time. But it's you as the buyer.
Almost a bitch, man.
Yeah, the buyers have a responsibility, right? Like numerous times people are hating on Whatnot, going like inflated prices. Well, it's only inflated. We can conjecture all the time. We can make assumptions that it's another retailer or a buddy buying it up for that book, but that value doesn't translate anywhere else. Like there's Whatnot sales doesn't necessarily get factored into GPA or some of the other places where they take that into consideration, right? Because it's strictly auction style. So, case in point, Randy and I bought the same comic book, same grade from the same seller. I actually won the first one, and I paid $105 for it. Randy actually got it for $99, right? So,
So
if you're a person or an entity trying to then say what that is, how do you track that across live auctions, right? And how do you then determine the value? So at least on the platform of Whatnot, I think that one's solely on the buyer. If I was a seller on Whatnot and I happen to have a controversial book or I happen to have a book that's hot, if I can start at $1 and watch that thing go, and all I'm doing is just talking about the book, I don't see how it's my fault.
I would say that's not your fault either. That's a legit example of market conditions. It's and in that case, it's not necessarily scarcity. We're talking about these custom covers. It's the lore behind it, especially with this one.
And Whatnot. I mean, Whatnot's caught a lot of black eyes. They just did a publishing, so they had their release party 2 cons ago. Mm-hmm. And then they put their books, and Randy and I were both on Whatnot looking and say, let's take a look at these exclusives. And man, that thing shot up so quick within
like $800 or something.
And then it went boom. And then Randy and I was like, I guess we're out of it.
Gonna have to pass on that.
Hey, Rocky, you're right. Supply and demand, and so
exactly
that definitely plays into it. So I would say if information came out to where Black Flag had an agreement with Nerdy Girl and Skeff to kind of say, hey, here you go, and
you have a big following, pump it up for me.
Big following.
That
would be where the influencing piece comes in, right? But if you're saying, I honestly, with this specific thing, with lack of that knowledge, this was a low print run, technically, right? Or reportedly a low print run, because there's a lot of people out there thinking there's obviously more of the original cover. They don't know how many of the acetate overlay was made. So low print run, popular character, big con. I think it would have sold out anyway. And I think you had people who were going to buy multiples, whether it's more, for me, multiple is more than one, right? So if you're in line and you buy more than one, you're either buying it for a friend or you're buying to profit off of, right? That's just at some point you're going to sell it. So you're buying multiples, you're there to then take advantage of that lack of supply. And to influence it means that you would have to know, one, everybody knew it was a limited run, but then you would have to know that where potentially that book could go or jack that price up. I don't think Whatnot has that potential to do that, but I don't think they do that, because again, the next guy saw what I paid. I was the first guy. I paid $100, $105 for my slab. The guy put it up, and somebody could easily say, well, hey, one guy got it for $105 and I'm not going to pay more than that. and and he actually got it for less. And that's a tactic that's seen all the time. You know, when we sell on eBay or Facebook, people go, "Hey, last sale was this." Well, that was great for that guy. You know,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm not selling it for that price. Go find one somewhere else. But I guess I said all that to say the buyers have a responsibility, right? Whether it's education or lack thereof, you know what you're comfortable at spending. You know, a lot of people crapped on Nicolas Cage back in the day when he spent all that money on Amazing Fantasy and all those big books, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Nick Cage is spending all this money. What's he doing to the rest of us?" Well, Nick Cage had it like that, and he wanted that book. And if you got it like that, and it's kind of why a lot of people dismiss heritage auctions. So they'll see some books at heritage auctions,
always get like big premiums,
big prices, but they think it's okay. Well, it's somebody who already bought a big book or bought something huge that they're just trying to then, to use an analogy, Randy and I go, "Hey, we already bought something. We're paying shipping anyway. Let me get something else to kind of justify." I don't have
people go to Heritage with those are the people with the fuck you money though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if another publisher or if another shop does the same. You know, I disagree with the hate or the vitriol that's being spit to Nerdy Girl and Skeff. You know, they were in a position to buy that many copies. Black Flag could have limited the number of copies people sold.
Yeah.
You know, that he sold to people. He could have been honest, saying, "Hey, we're open to pre-orders. Contact us here if you want some," type of thing. But the legality of this, of what they did, and CGC's explanation, whether Marvel goes after them or not, I think you're going to see. We potentially can see other shops do the same thing. Right.
Yeah, I would say I honestly don't see Marvel going after anybody at this point, because it's pretty known in the industry, at least, that, you know, what this comic is, that it's not Marvel didn't create this cover. They didn't. If it got to a point where everybody was blaming Marvel, yeah, then you would see some action. But I honestly don't see anything there. The damage, it would be hard to prove actual monetary damages on this one, because nobody's blaming Marvel.
Well, do they want to do anything to kind of set the precedent that, hey, you guys aren't allowed to do this?
Well, I mean, they could argue. I mean, they could make a trademark case out of the use of their logos to say, you know, I don't care what you're doing, our logo just can't be on
but
it.
just to keep people from doing it in the future.
But I also think that goes with their agreements, right? So, that's something that we could ask in the group, that in terms of. So I have not seen what the agreement is, right, between, like, if I contracted an artist, getting that original art, right, and then taking and getting that art, submitting it as a publisher, going, "Hey, this is what I want." I don't know what that language looks like, so I'd be curious to see what that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, you know, it could be contracted to make it that way. I mean, there would still be, you know, I think Black Flag would still have some liability there, but we also don't know, you know, what maybe they got licensed to use it. I mean, it's all conjecture at that point.
But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing, and this situation, because it brought up a lot of things, and a lot of people, and I was telling Randy, like, it showed some people who had legit concern about the hobby and where it goes, because they don't want to see. They keep going back to the crash. There was a lot of things that contributed to the crash. Over printing, I think, was, and then the time, right? Because a lot of comic books hit the mainstream, you know, Deaths of Superman and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And X-Men, that kind of big thing, and everybody looked at comic books as an investment, like the stock market, as opposed to a commodity. Man, you know, it's what somebody's willing to pay for it. And when there's 3 million copies of a comic book out there, it's not going to be worth as much as you think it is. So you have that camp, but then you also have the other camp of, you know, I think it's just straight haters, like, shit, they beat me to it. And
there's always going to be that. Oh yeah.
And they weren't able to profit on there. Because honestly, I think if that person, we wouldn't even be talking about it if the person who did the original Facebook post didn't do that, right? If they didn't disclose, hey, influencers cut the line, you know, and go from there, we wouldn't be talking about it right now, because they would have bought it, they would have gone out and they would have paid for it, and we would have been doing what most of us do now when we can't make it to a place. Shit, because I'm gonna go on the internet and buy a premium. And I'm with you though. Like the bot shit, I hate that stuff. Because we'll be on some exclusive releases, and you see it a lot in sneakers, right? In kicks, like you see that a lot when they do those drops. Bots out there doing that. I'm with you there that they should be able to do something to limit that and kind of curtail that. But this wasn't that case. This was a shop that had dead stock, figured shit. Let me sell what I can. Just wouldn't disclose what they had going on.
Yeah, I mean that's really. I mean, I think it's creative, very creative use of it. I mean, do your own acetate. Put it out there, something special, and it's just the story behind it just has too many questionable points on it.
It's crazy too. I mean, if you, I guess now we're just gonna pontificate there. But imagine if they would have done this right, not sold 2 per person, whatever, did everything what we feel was right, the precedent that would have set for other shops to explore some type of creativity like that, then make their own, like out of, which I think is wonderful, because you have a store sitting on dead stock. I'm able to take that dead stock, make something else of it, and then still contribute to the hobby in a positive way. Can you imagine how that would have set up to that a store as big as Black Flag or as popular as Black Flag would have been an inspiration to like Randy. Now we're like, whew, now it's a story like we ain't gonna do what the fuck those did. like, oh, you remember back in 2022 when Black Flag did? Nah, we ain't touching that shit.
I still got closets too, so don't put acetates on them.
Yeah.
But hey, I greatly appreciate you coming on here, man, and talking about this. And it's one of those things where we'll have to get you when we have time to go a little bit longer and we start slurring our words. Talking about that.
One of those evening shows with a glass of whiskey. Yeah.
It's a Sunday though, so it's a good thing for me. So you got anything else, James?
No, I'm good. I appreciate you coming out, man, because like I said, we wanted to get this the legal view of it, not just say the same things that everyone else has been saying.
I mean, it's all quick back and forth, so it's not the scholarly article level. I'm sure somebody's going to be in there and be like, "That's not right." I mean,
and obviously we're working with very limited information at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm just reading digital at this point, and mostly reading is image and boom. So,
so wherever you fall on this, however you feel, right or wrong, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree what Black Flag did was very murky in terms of creating the book and how it was created, and CGC contributed to that murkiness by saying one thing, then saying another thing, and then really trying to do that, and then they definitely opened the door for more like this, which then can have a potential of really damaging the hobby in a negative way. So if there's any anger left in this and to continue that conversation, it's that more books like this can enter the market and then be considered legitimate, and then cause confusion in the market and cause confusion to new collectors.
Yep.
Cool.
They almost got me.
They did. Hey, mark my words. If it comes back around that a little bit lower, Jamie will have one. He will have one.
I know the "in-trust" in the back bugs me.
It is. Yeah. It says it was supposed to be "In God We Trust," and it says "In God We Entrust." And I'm like, horrible. All right. Well, hey, thanks. This is actually our shortest episode of Drunk on Comics.
Yeah, right. and I only had one drink.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was like.
All right, look
mildly
sober
on
next one, Eric.
All right, man. I'll talk to you guys later.
Cheers.